Here's what they don't tell you about pirate life. 90% died within 2 years, not from sword fights or naval battles, but from scurvy, dysentery, and infected wounds. Your chances of surviving even one voyage were worse than Russian roulette. If you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from. So drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. All right, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to the Caribbean in 1715, and trust me, you're going to be real grateful for that comfortable bed by the time we're done. Congratulations. You've just woken up aboard the pirate ship Revenge somewhere in the Caribbean Sea. The year is 1715. And you're about to discover why the romanticized version of pirate life is complete fiction. The first thing that hits you isn't the gentle rocking of the ship or the sound of waves. It's the smell. Imagine the worst public restroom you've ever encountered. Multiply that by 10, add rotting fish, unwashed human bodies, and stale vomit. Then trap it all in a wooden box for months. That's what you're breathing right now. The stench is so overwhelming that your modern sensibilities immediately trigger your gag reflex. Welcome to your new reality. You're lying on what pirates call a hammock. But it's nothing like the comfortable versions you might know. This is a piece of rough canvas strung between 2 posts, and you're sharing the space below decks with nearly 200 other men. The ceiling is so low you can't stand up straight, and every surface is slick with condensation, grease, and substances you don't want to identify. The man next to you, who goes by One-Eye Jack for reasons that become immediately apparent, notices you're awake. His remaining eye is bloodshot. His teeth are mostly missing, and his breath could stop a charging bull. "First day, eh?" he croaks. "Best get used to it quick, or you'll be fish food before we reach Port Royal." You try to sit up and immediately understand why sailors develop sea legs. The ship isn't just rocking gently. It's pitching dramatically in what must be heavy seas. Your stomach, already churning from the overwhelming odor, now adds seasickness to your growing list of miseries. You lean over the side of your hammock and lose what little you had in your stomach, adding your contribution to the already stained deck below. "That's normal," Jack says without sympathy. "Took me 3 weeks to stop being sick every day, course." That was before the scurvy started showing. He opens his mouth to display gums that are dark with disease and teeth that wiggle when he talks. "Started losing my chompers after 2 months at sea. Lucky if I got half a dozen good ones left." The sound of a bell echoes through the ship, followed by shouting from above. "All hands on deck!" comes the cry. Jack starts moving with surprising agility despite his condition. "That means you too, fresh meat. Captain Blackwood doesn't like to wait." You climb the ladder to the main deck, and the Caribbean sunlight hits your eyes like needles. The tropical sun is brutal, especially when reflected off the water, and you immediately understand why so many pirates wear bandanas and wide-brimmed hats. But even squinting, you can see the organized chaos of a ship under sail. Men are scrambling up the rigging, adjusting sails, securing ropes. These aren't the swashbuckling heroes of Hollywood. They're desperate, often unwell men doing dangerous work in dangerous conditions. You watch one sailor lose his grip 30 feet up the mainmast. He falls hard onto the deck with a sound that tells you his leg is definitely broken. "Get him below!" Captain Blackwood calls out, without even looking at the injured man. Blackwood is exactly what you'd expect a pirate captain to look like. Tall, weathered, with a gray beard and cold eyes that have seen too much. But there's something else about him, a kind of exhaustion that speaks to the constant stress of keeping a crew of desperate men in line. "You must be our newest crew member," he says, turning his attention to you. "Let me make something clear right from the start. This isn't some adventure story. This is a business, and a dangerous one. Half of you won't see Christmas. And that's if we're lucky. If we're unlucky, we all end up decorating the gallows in Port Royal." He's referring to hanging, you realize. The casual way he discusses death tells you everything about the life expectancy of pirates. "Your job is simple," Blackwood continues. "Do what you're told, when you're told, how you're told. Questions get you extra work. Disobedience gets you severe punishment. Mutiny gets you marooned on a deserted island. Am I understood?" You nod, though you're not entirely sure what being marooned involves. You have a feeling you don't want to find out. Good. Jenkins will show you the ropes. Try not to get yourself hurt on your first day. Jenkins turns out to be a grizzled sailor in his 40s who's missing 2 fingers on his left hand. Cannon accident, he explains matter-of-factly when he notices you staring. Could have been worse. Saw a man lose his whole arm to a misfire. Didn't make it through the night. He begins your education in pirate life, and it's nothing like what you expected. First thing you need to know, he says, as he leads you around the ship, is that we're not the free spirits everyone talks about. We've got rules, same as any ship, except ours are enforced more. Creatively, he points to a document nailed to the mainmast. The ship's articles, every man signs them when he joins the crew. They cover everything from how we split treasure to what happens if you steal from your mates. You scan the document and realize it's surprisingly detailed and democratic. See that bit about voting? Jenkins continues, we elect our captain and our quartermaster. We decide on where to hunt and how to divide loot. But don't think that makes us soft. Break the code. And the same men who voted you in will vote to have you severely punished or abandoned. Your first job is helping with the ship's maintenance. And you quickly learn that a pirate ship is basically a floating disaster waiting to happen. Everything is constantly breaking, rotting, or wearing out. The ropes need constant attention, the sails require endless patching, and the hull needs to be pumped out every few hours to prevent sinking. See this? Jenkins shows you a section of the ship's side where the wood looks soft and discolored. Shipworm, little creatures that eat wood. They're slowly destroying the entire ship. We try to patch what we can, but eventually, this vessel will fall apart around us. The work is backbreaking and dangerous. You spend hours hauling heavy ropes, climbing rigging in rough weather, and doing repairs in conditions that would violate every modern safety regulation. By the end of your first day, your hands are raw with blisters. Your back aches from the unfamiliar labor and you're exhausted in a way you've never experienced. But the physical discomfort is nothing compared to the psychological stress. These men live with the constant knowledge that they're outlaws with prices on their heads. Every sail on the horizon could be a naval vessel coming to capture them. Every port they enter might be their last. You never really sleep easy, Jenkins tells you as evening falls. Always listening for the lookout's warning, always wondering if tonight's the night the Navy finds us. Some men can't handle the pressure, start drinking too much, picking fights, making poor decisions. Those men don't last long. As if to illustrate his point, you hear shouting from below decks. 2 crew members are having a heated argument that quickly turns physical. Within minutes, the quartermaster has broken up the fight, and both men are nursing various bumps and bruises. They'll probably be fine, Jenkins observes clinically. But that's another thing you need to understand. Tempers run hot out here. These men have nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Tensions build, especially when we've been at sea for weeks without taking a prize. Your second week aboard the Revenge begins with your first real taste of pirate medicine. The man who fell from the rigging on your first day has developed a serious infection in his broken leg. Without proper antibiotics, the wound has turned an alarming color and begun to smell terrible. Gonna need treatment, announces the ship's cook. A man called Salty Pete who serves as the closest thing they have to a surgeon. His qualifications consist of being steady with a knife and having treated injuries before. That's it. You watch with a mixture of fascination and horror as they prepare for the procedure. The patient is given a leather bit to clench between his teeth and a bottle of rum to dull the pain. Several men hold him steady while Salty Pete prepares his instruments and gets ready to work. Look away if you're squeamish, Jenkins advises. And you take his suggestion, even without watching. The sounds tell you everything you need to know about the primitive state of shipboard medical care. There's no anesthetic beyond alcohol. No sterile conditions, no proper surgical tools. The whole procedure takes about 15 minutes that feel like hours. When it's over, the patient has passed out from pain and exhaustion. His chances of survival are uncertain at best. That's actually considered successful, Jenkins tells you afterward. Pete's saved several men that way, lost a few others, but more live than die when he has to operate. This casual attitude toward injury and potential death is something you're still getting used to. These men live with the daily reality that serious injury often means death, and they've learned to accept it with a fatalism that's both admirable and disturbing. Your education in pirate realities continues with your first proper meal. You were expecting something exotic, fresh fish caught from tropical waters, perhaps tropical fruits. What you get is something called hardtack, which is basically a rock-hard biscuit that's infested with small insects, and salt pork that's been preserved so long it's more salt than meat. Don't pick out the bugs, Jenkins advises, as you stare at your biscuit in disgust. They're protein, and you'll need every bit you can get, he demonstrates by taking a bite that crunches audibly with tiny creatures. The water situation is even worse. Fresh water is precious on long voyages, and what they have is stored in wooden barrels where it quickly becomes stagnant and develops a greenish film on top. It tastes like something died in it, which Jenkins assures you probably did. Rum keeps better than water, Jenkins explains. But we ran out of that 2 weeks ago. This water will make you sick, but not drinking it will kill you faster. You force yourself to drink the revolting liquid, trying not to think about what might be growing in it. Within hours, your digestive system rebels, and you experience your first bout of the stomach troubles that are a constant companion of pirate life. The sanitary facilities on the ship consist of a few holes cut in a platform that extends over the side of the ship. There's no privacy, no toilet paper, and no dignity. You do your business while spray from the waves below soaks you, and you clean yourself with whatever scrap of cloth you can find. Gets easier, One-Eye Jack assures you as you return from another miserable visit to the ship's facilities. After a few weeks, you stop caring about dignity. Survival becomes all that matters. This proves to be prophetic, as days turn into weeks. You find yourself adapting to conditions that would have horrified your former self. You learn to sleep despite the smell, to eat food that's crawling with insects, to work despite constant discomfort and exhaustion. But adaptation doesn't mean comfort. Every day brings new challenges. Your clothes, soaked with salt spray, never really dry and develop a permanent stiffness that chafes your skin raw. Your hands, constantly handling rough ropes, develop calluses that crack and become painful. Your skin, exposed to tropical sun and salt air, becomes weathered and prematurely aged. Most disturbing is how quickly you begin to accept conflict as normal. Arguments break out almost daily over trivial matters. Who gets the least moldy portion of food? Who's shirking their duties? Who looked at someone wrong? These disputes are settled quickly by the ship's officers, but the underlying tensions never really disappear. The psychological toll is harder to measure, but equally devastating. The constant stress of being hunted, the knowledge that capture means certain death, the isolation from any normal human society. All of this weighs on the men in different ways. Some become increasingly aggressive, settling every dispute with hostility. Others withdraw into themselves, speaking less and less until they barely seem human anymore. After 3 weeks at sea, the lookout finally spots what everyone has been hoping for: a merchant vessel on the horizon. The transformation of the crew is immediate and dramatic. Men who were listless and depressed suddenly become focused and energetic. Weapons are checked, boarding plans are discussed, and the Revenge changes course to intercept. "This is what we've been waiting for," Captain Blackwood announces to the assembled crew. That's a Spanish treasure galleon, probably carrying silver from the New World mines. Take her, and we all eat well in Port Royal Fail, and we'll be eating hardtack until we starve. The approach takes several hours, and you use the time to prepare for your first taste of pirate combat. Jenkins hands you a cutlass and a pistol, neither of which you're particularly comfortable using. "Don't try to be a hero," he advises. "Stay behind the experienced men. Watch for opportunities and don't get yourself hurt." Injured pirates don't spend their share of the treasure. As you get closer to the merchant ship, you can see it's trying to flee, but the Revenge is faster and better handled. The gap closes steadily, and soon you're close enough to see the faces of the crew aboard the other vessel. They look terrified, which makes sense. They know exactly what's coming. The attack begins with cannon fire. The Revenge carries 12 guns, not enough to sink a large ship, but sufficient to disable it and convince its crew to surrender. The sound of cannon fire is nothing like what you've experienced in movies. It's not just loud. It's a physical force that you feel in your chest and bones. The Spanish ship returns fire, and you experience your first taste of being under attack. A cannonball whistles past your head with a sound like a giant angry bee, and you instinctively duck. The ball smashes into the ship's rail, sending wooden splinters flying like deadly arrows. One catches a pirate in the face, opening up a cut from his ear to his mouth. "That's nothing," Jenkins yells over the noise of battle. "Wait until they load grape shot." Grape shot turns out to be exactly what it sounds like. Clusters of small metal balls that turn cannons into giant shotguns. When the Spanish ship fires a load into the Revenge, it sounds like deadly hail hitting the deck and rigging. Several pirates go down immediately, wounded and bleeding from multiple small injuries. But the Revenge has more experienced gunners, and their shots are more accurate. Soon the Spanish ship's main mast comes crashing down in a tangle of rope and canvas, effectively crippling her ability to maneuver or flee. "Prepare to board," Blackwood commands, and grappling hooks fly through the air to secure the two ships together. This is the moment you've been dreading. Actual hand-to-hand combat with men fighting for their lives. The boarding action is nothing like the choreographed sword fights you've seen in movies. It's chaotic, brutal, and terrifying. Men shout and curse as they clash with cutlasses and axes. The decks become slippery with spilled water and other substances, making footing treacherous. The smell of gunpowder and fear fills the air. You follow Jenkins across the gap between ships, trying to stay out of the way of the real fighting. Your job, he's told you, is to secure prisoners and look for valuable cargo, not to engage in combat unless absolutely necessary. The Spanish crew puts up a fierce fight initially, but they're outnumbered and outmatched by men who fight for a living. Within 20 minutes, the battle is essentially over. Several Spanish sailors have been wounded or have jumped overboard to take their chances with the sharks, while the survivors have surrendered. "Search everything," Blackwood orders. "Tear this ship apart if you have to. I want every coin, every piece of jewelry, every valuable item found and brought to me." What follows is systematic looting that strips the captured ship of anything worth taking. You participate reluctantly, searching through the personal possessions of defeated sailors and terrified passengers. The experience is deeply uncomfortable. These people are victims, and you're stealing everything they own. But the alternative, as Jenkins reminds you, is starvation. "This is how we eat," he says as he pockets a silver watch. That merchant ship was carrying goods bought with Spanish gold stolen from native peoples. We're just redistributing the wealth. The final tally is impressive. Chests of silver coins, bolts of fine silk, barrels of rum, and various luxury goods that will fetch good prices in pirate-friendly ports. According to the ship's articles, every crew member will receive a share based on his role and seniority. But the victory comes at a cost. 2 pirates were seriously wounded in the fighting, including one you'd gotten to know, a young man from Cornwall who'd joined the crew to escape debts. He took a Spanish blade in the shoulder and is now laid up below decks, fevering and calling for his mother. "That's the trade," Blackwood says grimly as they prepare for the next phase of their voyage. "We take risks for rewards. Sometimes the risks don't pay off the way we hope. The aftermath is handled with practical efficiency. Bodies are prepared for burial at sea according to maritime tradition. There are no speeches about glory or honor, just a simple acknowledgement that these men took their chances, and some didn't make it." After 6 weeks at sea, the Revenge finally reaches Port Royal, Jamaica, the unofficial capital of Caribbean piracy. Your first glimpse of the town explains why pirates are drawn here despite the constant threat of arrest and execution. Port Royal is pure chaos, a ramshackle collection of taverns, gambling houses, shops, and various establishments where anything can be bought for the right price. The streets are unpaved mud mixed with sewage and garbage, and the smell rivals that of the ship you've just left. But to men who've been at sea for weeks, it represents civilization and all its pleasures. "Don't spend it all in one place," Jenkins advises, as you receive your share of the loot from the Spanish ship. More money than you've ever seen, but which you know will disappear quickly in this expensive town. Your first priority, like most of the crew, is a bath and clean clothes. The bathhouse is a luxury you'd never appreciated. Hot water, soap, and the chance to scrub weeks of accumulated grime from your skin. The water turns black almost immediately, and you have to change it twice before you feel truly clean. Clean clothes are almost as much of a luxury. The shirt and trousers you buy from a local merchant feel impossibly soft against skin accustomed to salt-stiffened rags. But the prices are outrageous. Everything in Port Royal costs 3 times what it would in a normal town, because merchants know pirates have money and are eager to spend it. Your next stop, again following the crew's example, is the nearest tavern. The rum flows freely, and for the first time in weeks, you're able to forget about the dangers and discomforts of pirate life. The alcohol helps dull the memories that have become your daily reality. But even in Port Royal, danger is never far away. The town is technically under English control, and there are always Royal Navy officers and colonial officials looking for wanted pirates. Men drink with their backs to walls and hands near their weapons. Conversations stop when strangers approach. Trust is a luxury few can afford. You witness your first Port Royal conflict on your second night in town. A dispute over a card game escalates into a brawl that involves half the tavern. The local authorities don't even investigate. They consider such incidents normal entertainment. The various establishments are another education in the harsh realities of life on the margins of society. The women who work in Port Royal's entertainment district are often desperate themselves. Escaped slaves, abandoned wives, criminals fleeing other colonies. Their lives are as dangerous and uncertain as those of their customers. You're told the story of Mary, a former plantation owner's wife who fled to Port Royal after her husband died of fever. Had to choose between starvation and this, she explains matter-of-factly. At least here I eat regular and nobody mistreats me. The gambling houses complete the picture of Port Royal's economy built on vice and temporary pleasure. Pirates with pockets full of Spanish silver lose fortunes on dice and cards, often winning and losing the same money several times in a single evening. Arguments over disputed games are common and sometimes lead to serious consequences. But perhaps most disturbing is how quickly you adapt to this environment. Within days, you're drinking heavily, gambling recklessly, and accepting chaos as part of the normal social order. The civilized person you were seems like a distant memory. Port Royal changes people, One-Eye Jack observes as you nurse drinks in a waterfront tavern. Men come here thinking they'll just visit and leave. But the place gets in your blood next thing you know. You've spent 6 months here and forgotten why you wanted to leave. This proves to be prophetic. What was supposed to be a brief rest and resupply stretches into weeks as the crew enjoys the pleasures of shore life.
But money runs out quickly in Port Royal and eventually,
the harsh mathematics of pirate economics reassert themselves. Time to go hunting again, Captain Blackwood announces one morning. Treasury's empty and the ship needs supplies. Anyone not aboard by sunset gets left behind. Your second voyage aboard the Revenge starts badly and gets worse. The Spanish have learned from previous attacks and are now sending their treasure ships in well-armed convoys. The lone merchant vessels that made easy prey are becoming rare as colonial authorities crack down on piracy. For 3 months, you cruise Caribbean waters without taking a single prize. The crew's morale plummets as food runs low and hopes fade. Men who were cheerful and optimistic during your successful first cruise now grumble constantly about the captain's leadership and the quartermaster's decisions. The food situation becomes critical. Hardtack runs out entirely, and you're reduced to eating anything remotely edible, seaweed, leather, even sawdust mixed with the last of the flour. Several crew members show signs of scurvy, their gums darkening and teeth becoming loose. Water becomes even more precious than food. The ship's water barrels are nearly empty, and what remains is so foul it's barely drinkable. Men start arguing over rations, and tensions rise as desperation sets in. We're going to have to try taking a convoy, Blackwood finally decides. It's a desperate choice. Attacking multiple ships with escort vessels means facing professional naval gunners and disciplined military crews rather than frightened merchant sailors. The target is a 4-ship convoy carrying silver from Mexico to Spain. 3 merchant vessels protected by a Spanish naval frigate, better armed and more experienced than anything the Revenge has faced before. The attack is a disaster from the beginning. The Spanish naval vessel has experienced gunners who place their shots with deadly accuracy. The Revenge's first broadside is answered by cannon fire that tears huge holes in her hull and rigging. Within minutes, it's clear the pirates have bitten off more than they can chew. The naval frigate's superior firepower is systematically destroying the Revenge, while the merchant ships escape to safety. We need to break off. The quartermaster shouts to Blackwood, but the captain is determined to salvage something from the disaster. "One more pass," he commands, turning the ship for another attack run. The second exchange of cannon fire is catastrophic for the pirates. A Spanish shot hits the ship's powder magazine, causing an explosion that eliminates a dozen men instantly and sets the ship on fire. Another shot brings down the mainmast, crushing several more pirates beneath its weight. You find yourself helping fight fires while cannonballs continue to smash into the ship around you. The heat is overwhelming, the smoke chokes your lungs, and the shouts of wounded men create a nightmare soundtrack to the destruction. Abandon ship. Someone finally screams, and the order spreads through what remains of the crew. But there aren't enough boats for everyone, and the Revenge is sinking fast in deep water miles from shore. You end up clinging to a piece of wreckage with 5 other survivors, watching the ship that had been your home disappear beneath the waves. Captain Blackwood goes down with her, either from choice or because he was too wounded to escape. The next 3 days floating in the Caribbean sun without food or fresh water provide your harshest lesson yet in pirate reality. 2 men succumb to their wounds, their bodies eventually slipping from the makeshift raft to sink beneath the waves. A third goes mad from thirst and tries to drink seawater, which only hastens his decline. When a passing merchant vessel finally rescues you, only 3 men remain alive, and you're all more dead than alive from exposure and dehydration. The merchant captain, a decent man named Williams, provides medical care and eventually delivers you to Kingston, Jamaica. Recovery takes weeks. Your skin is burned raw from sun and salt water, you've lost tremendous weight, and your mind keeps returning to the images of men dying around you. The nightmares are constant, explosions, screaming, the sight of the Revenge sinking beneath the waves. But perhaps worse than the physical and psychological trauma is the economic reality. You have no money, no possessions, and no legal means of earning a living. Your brief career as a pirate has left you with skills that are useless in legitimate society and experiences that mark you as a criminal. Jenkins, one of the other survivors, faces the same dilemma. Could try to join another crew, he suggests. But word gets around about disasters like ours. Captains don't like hiring men who've survived ship losses. Think it brings bad luck. The alternative is finding work in Kingston's legitimate economy. But that proves almost impossible, your hands. Scarred by rope work and calloused by years of hard labor, mark you immediately as a sailor. But your lack of recent legitimate references makes merchant captains suspicious. You eventually find work loading cargo on the docks, backbreaking labor that pays barely enough to survive on. The irony isn't lost on you. You're handling the same kinds of goods you used to steal. But now you're earning pennies instead of Spanish silver. The other dock workers are mostly former pirates, slaves, and other men with few options. Their stories follow depressingly similar patterns, brief periods of prosperity followed by disaster, capture, or simply the grinding reality that piracy doesn't pay for most practitioners. A man made 7 successful cruises, one tells you as you share a meal of thin soup and stale bread. Rich as a king for a while, owned a house in Port Royal, kept a woman in silk dresses. Then his 8th voyage went bad, captured by the Navy and executed in Spanish Town. All that money, all that success. And he ended up swinging from a rope just like any common criminal. You begin to understand the statistics that seemed so dramatic when you first heard them. 90% of pirates dying within 2 years isn't just about disease and conflict. It's about the mathematical impossibility of long-term success in an occupation where every job could be your last. The successful pirates, you learn, are either exceptionally lucky, exceptionally smart, or exceptionally ruthless. Most combine all 3 qualities and still don't survive long. The romantic stories about pirates retiring rich are rare exceptions that prove the general rule of poverty, hardship, and early death. Your own health continues to decline despite being on dry land. The months of poor nutrition, contaminated water, and constant stress have taken a permanent toll. Your teeth are loose from mild scurvy. Your digestion never fully recovers from the repeated bouts of stomach illness, and you carry scars from various injuries that ache constantly. More troubling is the psychological damage. You find yourself unable to sleep properly, starting at sudden noises, and feeling constantly anxious even in safe situations. The hypervigilance that kept you alive as a pirate becomes a liability in normal society, where people mistake your wariness for aggression or instability. Alcohol becomes your primary coping mechanism like so many other former pirates. The rum that was once a luxury becomes a necessity to dull both physical pain and psychological trauma. But alcohol costs money you don't have, creating a vicious cycle of debt and desperation. Working on Kingston's docks gives you a different perspective on the piracy phenomenon. You see the larger economic and political forces that create pirates and ultimately destroy them. The Caribbean is a complex web of competing European powers, each using pirates when convenient and eliminating them when politically necessary. The English colonial authorities, you learn, have a complicated relationship with piracy. They condemn it publicly, while privately benefiting from the goods pirates bring to market and the harassment pirates provide to Spanish shipping. Many colonial officials have financial interests in pirate activities, taking percentages of stolen goods in exchange for protection. But this arrangement is inherently unstable. As the Spanish grow stronger and more effective at protecting their shipping, and as legitimate trade becomes more profitable than piracy, the authorities find pirates more liability than asset. The crackdown is inevitable and merciless. You witness several executions during your time in Kingston. Former pirates captured by Navy patrols or betrayed by former associates. The hangings are public spectacles designed to discourage others from choosing the pirate life. The condemned men usually die badly, their necks failing to break cleanly, leaving them to strangle slowly while crowds cheer. "That could be us," Jenkins observes grimly as you watch 3 former members of Captain Kidd's crew meet their end. "Any of us who sailed under the black flag, they catch you. And that's your fate regardless of what crimes you actually committed." The fear of capture becomes a constant presence in your life. Even though you're no longer actively engaged in piracy, your past makes you a wanted man. Naval officers and colonial officials are always looking for former pirates to arrest, and the reward money makes betrayal an attractive option for desperate people. You learn to avoid certain areas of town, to change your routines regularly, and to maintain fake identities when dealing with officials. But this paranoid existence is exhausting and isolating, cutting you off from normal human relationships and social connections. The economic reality of post-pirate life is equally grim. The skills you learned as a pirate, navigation, cannon operation, boarding tactics, have no legitimate applications. Your experience handling large amounts of stolen money doesn't qualify you for work in banking or commerce. Your ability to survive in desperate conditions doesn't translate to success in normal society. Most former pirates end up in manual labor if they're lucky, or turn to other forms of crime if they're not. Highway robbery, smuggling, and fraud are common second careers for men who can't or won't adapt to legitimate work. But these alternatives are generally less profitable and equally dangerous as piracy itself. The women who associate with pirates face their own harsh realities. Pirate wives and companions often end up destitute when their men are captured or eliminated. The children of pirates grow up in poverty and shame, marked by their father's crimes and unable to escape the stigma of their birth. You meet several such women during your time in Kingston, former beauties now aged prematurely by hardship, supporting themselves and their children through various desperate means. Their stories provide another perspective on the true cost of pirate life. Your education in the realities of 18th century medicine continues during your time in Kingston. The yellow fever season brings a plague that takes hundreds of lives and provides you with first-hand experience of medical care in an age before antibiotics or proper sanitation. The fever starts subtly, just feeling tired and slightly nauseous. But within days, you're burning with fever and vomiting constantly. Your skin takes on the yellowish tinge that gives the disease its name, and you begin to understand why yellow fever is called one of the Caribbean's greatest killers. The local doctor, a Scottish man named MacLeod, does what he can with the limited tools available. This consists mainly of bloodletting, purging with mercury-based medicines, and prayer. The bloodletting weakens you further, the mercury poisoning makes you sicker, and the prayers seem ineffective. Not much we can do, MacLeod admits frankly. Either your constitution is strong enough to fight it off, or it isn't. I've seen men pass away in 3 days, and I've seen others recover after weeks of suffering. You're one of the lucky ones who survive. But the experience leaves you permanently weakened. Your liver, damaged by the fever, can no longer process alcohol effectively, ending your use of rum as a painkiller. Your kidneys function poorly, leaving you constantly fatigued and prone to swelling. But your survival gives you insight into why disease is such a destroyer among pirates, on ships. Crowded conditions and poor sanitation create perfect environments for epidemic diseases. Yellow fever, typhus, dysentery, and other illnesses spread rapidly through crews, often eliminating more men than combat. The medical care available aboard pirate ships is primitive even by 18th century standards. Ship surgeons are usually barbers, cooks, or other crew members with no formal medical training. Their treatments often do more harm than good, and their surgical instruments are kitchen knives and carpenter's tools. Scurvy alone probably accounts for more pirate deaths than all other causes combined. The disease caused by vitamin C deficiency begins with fatigue and joint pain, but progresses to bleeding gums, loose teeth, and eventually death. The cure, fresh fruits and vegetables, is almost never available on long voyages. You witness several cases of advanced scurvy among the dock workers, former pirates whose bodies never recovered from years of nutritional deprivation. These men, some still in their 20s, appear ancient with their sunken faces, missing teeth, and skin covered in dark spots where blood vessels have burst beneath the surface. Lost all my teeth by age 25, one tells you. Gumming a piece of bread. Used to be able to bite through rope. Now I can barely manage soft food. That's what 8 years of pirate food does to a man. The psychological effects of chronic malnutrition are equally devastating. Men who once displayed quick wit and sharp reflexes now struggle with basic mental tasks. Memory problems, difficulty concentrating, and mood swings are common among survivors of extended pirate voyages. Various diseases add another layer of medical horror to pirate life. The ports of Port Royal and other pirate havens are breeding grounds for infections that were incurable in the early 18th century. These diseases progress slowly but inevitably, causing serious long-term health problems. You encounter several former pirates in various stages of disease progression. Some still in the early phases with painful symptoms, others in the final stages with trembling hands and confused minds. The mercury treatments used by doctors often cause more suffering than the diseases themselves, leading to tooth loss, kidney damage, and mercury poisoning. Living among Kingston's underclass provides insight into the social structures that create and sustain piracy. The men who become pirates aren't usually born criminals. They're products of economic systems that offer few legitimate opportunities for advancement. Many of your fellow dock workers are former sailors from the Royal Navy, discharged without pensions or prospects after years of service. Others are escaped indentured servants who chose outlawry over continued bondage. Some are survivors of failed colonial ventures, men who invested everything in plantation schemes that collapsed due to disease, weather, or economic fluctuations. Had my own tobacco farm in Virginia, one man tells you during a break from loading sugar barrels. Worked it for 12 years, built it up from nothing. Then a hurricane wiped out 3 years of crops in one night, and the creditors took everything. Came south looking for a fresh start. Ended up running with Blackbeard's crew for 2 years. The racial dynamics of Caribbean piracy add another layer of complexity. Many pirate crews include significant numbers of escaped slaves, freed blacks, and men of mixed race who face severe discrimination in legitimate society. For these men, piracy offers something approaching equality that's unavailable elsewhere. Only place a black man could be treated same as white, explains Samuel, a former slave who sailed with several pirate crews before finding dock work. Pirate ship judged you by what you could do, not the color of your skin. Still got my share of prize money, same as anyone else. But this relative equality comes at the price of constant danger and ultimate exclusion from any possibility of normal life. Former slave pirates can never return to their home colonies. Where they face re-enslavement or execution, they're condemned to life on the margins, always moving, always looking over their shoulders. Women in the pirate economy face their own unique challenges, while a few become pirates themselves. Most serve as support systems, providing supplies, information, and services to men who can't participate in legitimate society. These relationships are often transactional rather than romantic, based on mutual need rather than affection. Pirate's woman ain't really a wife, explains Martha, who lived with 3 different pirates over the years. You're more like a business partner. He brings money when he can. You manage the household and provide a safe place when he needs to hide. But you better have your own income. Because pirates don't retire, they just die young. The children of pirates face perhaps the harshest fate of all, marked by their father's crimes, excluded from respectable society. They often follow family tradition into lives of crime and violence. The cycle perpetuates itself across generations, creating families trapped in patterns of illegality and early death. You meet several such children during your time in Kingston, boys barely into their teens already planning their first pirate voyages. Girls resigned to lives of association with criminals. Their casual acceptance of violence and death is disturbing evidence of how quickly human nature adapts to extreme circumstances. After a year of dock work, you've saved enough money to consider your options. The arithmetic of legitimate labor versus pirate gains is sobering. You're earning in a month what you once made in a day as a successful pirate, but you're also earning it consistently and without the constant threat of violent death. The temptation to return to piracy is constant every few weeks. Word spreads through Kingston's underworld about crews forming for new ventures. The old excitement returns as men discuss potential prizes and calculate their shares of imaginary treasures. Heard tell of a Spanish treasure fleet sailing alone from Cartagena next month, Jenkins mentions one evening. Captain Rodriguez is looking for experienced men. Could be the chance we've been waiting for. The rational part of your mind knows this is exactly the kind of thinking that leads to disaster. But the irrational part remembers the thrill of successful raids, the camaraderie of shared danger, and the brief periods of wealth that made all the suffering seem worthwhile. You attend several recruiting meetings in waterfront taverns, listening to captains make their pitches to desperate men. The promises are always the same: easy prizes, minimal risk, enough treasure to retire in comfort. The reality, as you now understand, is that most ventures fail completely, and even successful ones rarely provide long-term security. The mathematical truth about piracy becomes clearer the longer you observe it from the outside. For every successful raid that captures significant treasure, there are dozens of failed attempts that result in death, capture, or financial loss. The men who profit from piracy are usually the ones organizing expeditions rather than participating in them. Port royals, merchants, tavern keepers, and ship suppliers make steady profits from pirates without facing any of the risks. They buy stolen goods at deep discounts, sell supplies at inflated prices, and charge premium rates for services. When pirates are captured or eliminated, these businessmen simply find new customers. The colonial officials who secretly support piracy while publicly condemning it represent another layer of exploitation. They take percentages of pirate profits in exchange for protection, but abandon their partners whenever political pressure requires it. The pirates bear all the risks while sharing profits with people who face none of the dangers. Even successful pirate captains rarely achieve long-term financial security. Their expenses are enormous, maintaining ships, paying crews, purchasing weapons and supplies. Most successful captains spend money as fast as they make it, living lavishly during good times but facing poverty whenever luck turns against them. Knew Captain Morgan before he got his pardon, an old-timer tells you. Rich as any man in the Caribbean, owned half of Port Royal at one point. But he spent it faster than he made it. Parties, women, investments that went bad. When he finally quit piracy, he was nearly broke despite all his success. The few pirates who do achieve lasting wealth generally do so by transitioning into legitimate business, often using their criminal contacts and knowledge of illegal markets to build trading empires. But this transition requires skills, connections, and capital that most pirates never acquire. As your second year in Kingston progresses, you become increasingly aware of the long-term psychological damage inflicted by your pirate experience. What seemed like temporary stress responses have become permanent features of your personality, fundamentally changing who you are. Sleep remains elusive and restless. Years after your last sea voyage, you still wake at the slightest sound, instantly alert and ready for danger that isn't there. Your dreams are filled with combat, storms, and sinking ships. The peaceful sleep of ordinary people seems like a luxury you'll never again enjoy. Social interaction has become difficult and uncomfortable. You find yourself constantly assessing strangers as potential threats, looking for weapons, escape routes, and tactical advantages in every situation. Normal conversation feels forced and artificial after years of communicating primarily about survival and danger. Trust, once easily given, now seems impossible. Every new acquaintance might be a potential betrayer, Every friendly gesture might conceal hostile intent. This paranoia, once a survival tool in the pirate world, now isolates you from the human connections that might provide healing and support. The capacity for violence that piracy required hasn't disappeared with your change of occupation. You catch yourself considering extreme responses to minor conflicts, measuring opponents and calculating advantages. This internal readiness for conflict is disturbing even to yourself. Alcohol, despite your liver damage, remains a necessary tool for managing psychological pain. The memories of events you've witnessed and participated in require constant suppression, and rum provides temporary relief from images that surface unbidden during quiet moments. You're not alone in these struggles. Most of the former pirates working Kingston's docks display similar symptoms: hypervigilance, social isolation, substance abuse, and hair-trigger responses to perceived threats. The informal brotherhood that develops among these damaged men provides some support, but it's solidarity based on shared trauma rather than hope for recovery. "We're all marked," Jenkins observes during one of your philosophical discussions in a dockside tavern. "Marked by what we've seen, what we've done, what we've survived. Can't go back to being innocent. Can't move forward to being respectable. We're stuck in between, belonging nowhere." The civilian population of Kingston views former pirates with a mixture of fascination, fear, and disgust. Children dare each other to speak to known ex-pirates. Adults cross streets to avoid them, and authorities watch them constantly for signs of criminal activity. This social isolation reinforces the psychological damage and makes recovery more difficult. Religious consolation, which provides comfort to many people facing trauma and hardship, seems unavailable to most former pirates. The violence and theft that define their previous lives feel incompatible with conventional Christianity, and the judgment they perceive from religious communities drives them further into isolation. Some men do find redemption through faith, renouncing their past and dedicating their remaining years to charitable works or religious service. But these conversions are rare and often viewed with suspicion by both former associates and respectable society. Your third year in Kingston brings increasing pressure from colonial authorities determined to eliminate piracy entirely. The Royal Navy has tripled its Caribbean presence, and new governors arrive with explicit orders to capture every pirate they can find, regardless of whether they're currently active. The net begins closing around former pirates throughout the region. Men who thought their past was safely buried find themselves arrested based on old testimony or new accusations. The reward money for information about pirates creates a class of professional informants who make careers of betraying their former associates. "They're coming for all of us," One-Eye Jack warns during one of your clandestine meetings in a sugar plantation outside town. "Doesn't matter if we've gone straight. Doesn't matter how long we've been clean. They want to make examples. And we're the examples they'll use." Several men you know from your pirate days are captured and executed in highly publicized trials. The authorities make sure these executions receive maximum attention, publishing detailed accounts in newspapers and distributing notices describing the criminals' fates. The psychological pressure of being hunted becomes unbearable for some former pirates. 3 men you know take their own lives rather than face capture and execution. Others flee to remote islands or distant colonies, abandoning any hope of normal life to avoid the gallows. You begin making your own escape plans, though your options are limited. Your reputation as a former member of the Revenge's crew has spread throughout the Caribbean, making you recognizable to bounty hunters and naval officers. The Spanish colonies would likely imprison or execute you on sight, and the French territories offer little better prospects. The irony of your situation becomes increasingly apparent. Your brief career as a pirate has made you unemployable in legitimate society, while also making you too well known to return to piracy successfully. You're trapped between 2 worlds belonging to neither. Wanted by both for different reasons. "Should have gone down with the ship," Jenkins mutters during one particularly dark evening. "Would have been cleaner than this slow strangulation. At least Captain Blackwood went down fighting instead of spending years looking over his shoulder." The stress of constant fear begins taking a physical toll that compounds your existing health problems. You develop stomach problems that make eating painful, chronic headaches that rum can no longer relieve, and a tremor in your hands that makes fine work difficult. Your few remaining possessions fit easily into a single bag, kept always ready for immediate departure. You've memorized the sailing schedules of ships leaving Kingston and identified several potential hiding places in the surrounding countryside. But you know these preparations are probably futile. When they come for you, they'll likely succeed as your 4th year in Jamaica begins. You're forced to confront the full accounting of your pirate career. The brief period of excitement and occasional prosperity has been followed by years of fear, poverty, and declining health. The romantic adventure you once imagined has revealed itself as a trap that destroyed most of those who entered it. Of the original crew of the Revenge, fewer than a dozen men remain alive. Most were lost in the ship's destruction. Several were subsequently captured and executed. Others succumbed to disease or violence in the intervening years. The survivors are scattered across the Caribbean, living under assumed names and constantly looking over their shoulders. The financial calculation is equally sobering. Your total earnings from piracy, accumulated over months of successful raiding, lasted less than 2 weeks in Port Royal. The years since then have been spent in manual labor, earning a fraction of what you once made in a single day. Your net lifetime earnings would have been higher if you'd never become a pirate at all. The social costs are perhaps the highest. You have no family, no permanent home, no legitimate identity, no hope for conventional happiness or security. The skills you developed as a pirate have no value in normal society, and the psychological damage you suffered makes normal relationships impossible. Your health, permanently compromised by years of poor nutrition, contaminated water, tropical diseases, and constant stress continues to deteriorate. The life expectancy statistics that seemed abstract when you first heard them now feel personal and immediate. You're unlikely to see your 40th birthday, and your remaining years will likely be marked by increasing pain and disability. Was it worth it? Jenkins asks during what might be your final conversation before you attempt to flee Jamaica ahead of an expected warrant for your arrest. It's a question you've been avoiding,
but can no longer ignore. The honest answer is complicated.
The brief periods of excitement, camaraderie, and prosperity were genuinely fulfilling in ways that your current life is not. The experience of living completely outside conventional society's rules had its own rewards. The knowledge that you survived experiences that would destroy most people provides a certain grim satisfaction. But these positives are overwhelmed by the negatives, the fear, the violence, the constant proximity to death, the ultimate futility of it all. The men who became pirates seeking freedom found themselves trapped in a lifestyle more constraining than the legitimate society they rejected. The search for easy wealth led to poverty more absolute than most people ever experience. The adventure that seemed to promise escape from ordinary life's limitations actually imposed more severe limitations. The rebellion against authority led to subjugation to more arbitrary and cruel authorities. The quest for independence created dependencies more degrading than conventional employment. Your departure from Jamaica is hastily arranged when informants report that naval officers are asking specific questions about former members of the Revenge. You have perhaps 24 hours before warrants are issued, and your escape plan must be implemented immediately. The merchant vessel Prosperity is scheduled to sail for the Carolinas at dawn, and her captain, a man named Stevens, is known to be less particular about his passengers' backgrounds than most. The passage costs most of your remaining savings, but freedom from immediate arrest is worth any price. Your farewell to Jamaica is deliberately minimal. No goodbyes, no sentimental visits to familiar places, just a quiet departure in the pre-dawn darkness. You carry everything you own in a single sea bag, the same type you carried as an active pirate. The parallel is not lost on you. The Prosperity is a legitimate merchant vessel, and being aboard her provides your first experience of lawful sea travel in years. The contrast with pirate ships is dramatic. The crew is disciplined and professional. The ship is clean and well-maintained. The food is adequate and reasonably fresh. But even this legal voyage carries risks for someone with your background. The captain and crew suspect you're fleeing something, and their suspicions make you constantly nervous. Other passengers include colonial officials who might recognize you, merchants who might have been victims of pirate raids, and naval officers traveling on personal business. You spend most of the voyage below decks, claiming seasickness as an excuse to avoid social interaction. The irony of suffering genuine seasickness after years as a pirate provides bitter amusement during the long days of the Atlantic crossing. The storm that strikes the Prosperity 3 days out from Jamaica tests both the ship and your nerves. For hours, you listen to familiar sounds: wind howling through rigging, waves crashing over the deck, men shouting orders above the noise. But now you're a passenger rather than a crew member, helpless to influence the ship's fate. During the storm's worst moments, you find yourself thinking about the Revenge's final battle and sinking. The terror of being trapped below decks while the ship fights for survival brings back memories you've tried to suppress. For several hours, you're convinced you'll meet the same fate as Captain Blackwood and the rest of your former crewmates. But the Prosperity's professional crew manages to ride out the storm with only minor damage, and the voyage continues toward the Carolina coast. Your survival feels less like victory than like postponement. You've escaped one threat only to face others equally serious in your destination. Charleston, South Carolina, offers temporary refuge but no permanent solution to your problems. The growing colonial city needs laborers and asks few questions about workers' backgrounds. But it's also connected to the same imperial system that's hunting pirates throughout the Caribbean. Your first job is loading rice barrels in Charleston's busy port. Work that's familiar from your time in Kingston, but pays even less. The rice dust aggravates your damaged lungs, and the humid climate makes your tropical diseases more active. Within weeks, you're suffering from recurring bouts of fever and stomach illness that would have eliminated a weaker man. The other dock workers in Charleston include several former pirates, but their stories are variations on familiar themes: brief periods of success, followed by years of decline, failed attempts to build legitimate lives, constant fear of discovery and arrest. None has successfully transitioned to respectability, and most expect to die in poverty and obscurity. Carolina's full of men running from something, explains Tom, a former member of Stade de Bonnet's crew who's worked Charleston's docks for 3 years. Pirates, debtors, escaped servants, men who eliminated someone in duels. We're all here because we couldn't stay where we came from. But that doesn't mean we're safe here. The colonial authorities in Charleston are less actively anti-pirate than those in Jamaica, but they're not sympathetic either. Former pirates are tolerated as long as they cause no trouble and provide useful labor. But any legal difficulty would likely result in deportation back to colonies where hanging awaits. The social isolation you experienced in Jamaica continues in Charleston. Respectable colonists view dock workers with suspicion, and former pirates are considered especially dangerous. You find lodging in a boarding house that caters to transients and criminals, paying weekly rates that consume most of your earnings. Your health continues its steady decline. The combination of tropical diseases, malnutrition, injury, and stress has aged you far beyond your actual years. Men a decade older than you appear younger and healthier, while you look like someone's grandfather despite being barely past 30. The psychological symptoms that plagued you in Jamaica persist and even intensify in Charleston's unfamiliar environment. Sleep remains elusive, social interaction feels threatening, and alcohol consumption increases as your primary method of managing anxiety and depression. News from the Caribbean reaches Charleston regularly through merchant vessels and official dispatches, and the reports are uniformly grim for anyone with a pirate background. The Royal Navy's anti-piracy campaign is achieving dramatic success, with major pirate leaders being captured or eliminated throughout the region. Blackbeard's death in North Carolina removes one of the last great pirate captains, and his head is displayed on a pole as warning to others who might consider following his example. The symbolic impact is enormous. If Edward Teach couldn't escape the law's reach, no pirate is safe anywhere. The end of the War of Spanish Succession eliminates one of the economic factors that sustained Caribbean piracy. European powers no longer need privateers to harass enemy shipping, and the letters of marque that provided legal cover for many pirate activities are no longer available. Legitimate trade becomes increasingly profitable as colonial economies mature, reducing the economic incentives for piracy. Merchant vessels become better armed and travel in larger convoys, making them more difficult targets. The Spanish improve their naval defenses and develop more effective anti-pirate tactics. Perhaps most importantly, colonial societies become less tolerant of the disorder and violence that piracy represents. As plantations become more established and trade relationships more stable, the chaos that pirates bring is seen as a threat to prosperity rather than a source of cheap goods and easy money. Golden Age is over. Tom observes as you read news of another pirate execution in a Charleston tavern. Time when a man could make a living with a sword and a fast ship is gone. World's getting civilized, and there's no place left for our kind. The implications of this transformation are clear to anyone with intelligence and honesty. The few remaining active pirates are being systematically hunted down and eliminated. Former pirates who've gone legitimate live under constant threat of discovery and arrest. The lifestyle that briefly flourished in the Caribbean's chaotic early colonial period is ending, and its practitioners are ending with it. Your own prospects seem equally grim. Too well known to return to piracy successfully. Too damaged to build a legitimate life successfully. Too old and sick to start over somewhere else. You're trapped in a situation with no good outcomes. 5 years after the destruction of the Revenge, you receive word that fundamentally changes your understanding of your pirate experience. A letter from a former crewmate who escaped to Madagascar brings news of other survivors and updates on the fate of men you sailed with. Of the Revenge's crew of nearly 200 men, fewer than 20 are confirmed alive. Most were lost in the ship's sinking. Several were subsequently captured and executed. Others succumbed to disease, violence, or simply the grinding hardships of post-pirate life. The mortality rate exceeds even the pessimistic statistics you remember from your first day aboard. But more shocking is the news about Captain Blackwood's treasure. The Spanish silver taken in your successful raid was never spent or distributed as promised. Instead, Blackwood buried it on a small island. Intending to retrieve it after the danger passed, he passed away with the secret. And the treasure remains hidden while his former crew lives in poverty. This revelation crystallizes the fundamental fraud underlying pirate mythology. The treasure you risked your life to capture was never really yours. It belonged to whoever was clever enough to hide it, and lucky enough to survive to claim it. The democracy and profit-sharing that supposedly distinguished pirates from other criminal enterprises was largely illusory. The mathematical reality becomes starkly clear. Your total lifetime earnings from piracy amount to less than what you would have made in 2 months of legitimate employment. The brief periods of prosperity were funded by money that was always intended to be temporary. Bait to keep crews loyal while captains planned their real scores. Your physical condition continues deteriorating at an accelerated pace. The recurring fevers are lasting longer and occurring more frequently. Your chronic digestive problems are worsening despite dietary changes. And new symptoms suggest that tropical diseases contracted during your pirate years are progressing toward their final stages. The psychological toll has become equally severe. Nightmares now occur almost nightly, featuring not just combat and shipwreck, but also the faces of people you helped rob. The terror in civilians' eyes during raids. The casual cruelty that you participated in or witnessed without protest. "We were just bandits with boats," you confessed to Tom, during one of your increasingly philosophical conversations. Told ourselves we were free men fighting the system. But we were just predators feeding on people weaker than ourselves. All the talk about brotherhood and democracy was just pretty words covering up organized theft and violence. This moral reckoning is perhaps the hardest part of your post-pirate experience. The romantic self-image that sustained you through years of hardship and danger has been revealed as self-deception. You weren't a romantic rebel or noble outlaw. You were a criminal who helped terrorize innocent people for money you never actually received. Your 6th year after leaving piracy brings a cascade of health problems that make continued work increasingly difficult. The combined effects of tropical diseases, malnutrition, injury, and stress have created a medical situation that's beyond the limited capabilities of colonial medicine. The recurring fevers now last for weeks at a time, leaving you weak and disoriented. Your digestive system can no longer process normal food, forcing you to subsist on thin gruel and watered rum. The chronic pain from old injuries has intensified, making sleep almost impossible even when exhaustion overwhelms you. Most disturbing are the mental symptoms that suggest permanent brain damage from repeated episodes of tropical fever. Your memory, once sharp and reliable, now fails regularly. Names and faces that were once familiar become strange and threatening. Time becomes fluid. Sometimes you think you're still aboard the Revenge. Sometimes you can't remember how you got to Charleston. Your ability to work steadily diminishes as employers lose patience with your unreliability and declining performance. The physical demands of dock work exceed what your damaged body can provide. and your mental confusion creates safety hazards that endanger other workers. Tom helps when he can, sharing his meager earnings and providing basic care during your worst episodes. But he has his own health problems and financial struggles. Former pirates helping former pirates in a downward spiral of poverty and disease. Should write it down, Tom suggests during one of your clearer moments. What it was really like, not the stories people tell. Might help someone else avoid making the same mistakes we made, but you lack the literacy skills, physical strength, and mental clarity needed for such a project. Your story, like those of most pirates, will end with you, leaving only the romanticized versions that ignore the reality of disease, poverty, violence, and early death. The boarding house owner, a practical woman named Mrs. Henderson, makes it clear that your continued residence depends on regular payment of rent. Your shrinking income and increasing medical expenses make this impossible, and eviction seems inevitable. Charleston's streets contain numerous former sailors, discharged soldiers, and other men who've fallen through society's limited safety net. You join their ranks, sleeping in doorways, begging for food, accepting charity when it's offered. The transformation from feared pirate to helpless vagrant completes your fall from whatever grace you once possessed. As your health continues its final decline, you find yourself with time to contemplate the full arc of your pirate experience and its aftermath. The honest accounting is devastating. A life wasted pursuing illusions, damaged beyond repair in service to dreams that were always impossible. The adventure you sought when you first joined a pirate crew was real enough, but its costs far exceeded its benefits. The excitement of combat, the thrill of successful raids, the camaraderie of shared danger. These experiences were genuine and meaningful, but they were purchased with suffering that continues long after the excitement faded. The freedom that piracy promised turned out to be another form of slavery, bondage to violence, to constant danger, to economic systems beyond your control or understanding. The democracy you believed in was largely fictional, manipulated by leaders who kept the real power and profits for themselves. The wealth that motivated your decision to become a pirate was always ephemeral. Easy come, easy go, as the saying suggests. But in your case, it was more accurate to say easy come, never really yours. Gone before you understood its true value, the brotherhood you found among pirates was real but conditional, dependent on shared circumstances that evaporated when those circumstances changed. Former shipmates became strangers, allies became potential betrayers, and the bonds that seemed so strong at sea proved fragile on land. Your impact on the world was entirely negative. You contributed nothing to human progress, created no value, built nothing lasting or beneficial. Your existence made the world a slightly more dangerous place for innocent people trying to live productive lives. The skills you developed as a pirate, combat, seamanship, survival in extreme conditions, proved useless in peaceful society. The knowledge you gained about navigation, weather, and maritime affairs had no legitimate applications that you could access with your criminal background. Most painfully, you realized that every major decision you made as an adult was wrong. Joining the pirate crew, staying with them after understanding the realities, failing to leave during your brief period in Port Royal, not using your share of treasure more wisely. Each choice led you further from any possibility of happiness or success. The people you harmed during pirate raids, merchant sailors wounded or eliminated, passengers terrorized, families impoverished by theft, deserved better than to suffer for your mistaken dreams of easy wealth and romantic adventure. Your crimes against them can never be undone or adequately in your final weeks. Confined to a charity hospital bed through the kindness of Charleston's religious community, you have opportunity to perform the ultimate calculation. Was your brief pirate career worth the cost in suffering and shortened life? The arithmetic is straightforward. Your active piracy lasted approximately 8 months, during which you experienced perhaps 20 days of genuine excitement and satisfaction. The remaining time was spent in discomfort, danger, boredom, and fear. The ratio of pleasure to pain was roughly 1 to 12. Your post-pirate years have been uniformly negative. 7 years of declining health, social isolation, economic hardship, and psychological trauma. Every day since leaving the Revenge has been worse than the last. With no hope for improvement or redemption, your total life expectancy, assuming you pass away within the next few weeks as seems likely, will be approximately 32 years. This is significantly below the average for men of your generation. Even accounting for the generally harsh conditions of early 18th century life, the financial calculation is equally stark. Your lifetime earnings from piracy, including the brief period of prosperity in Port Royal, amounted to less than what you could have earned in 1 year of legitimate employment. Your net worth at death will be essentially zero. No property, no savings, no possessions of value. But perhaps most important is the social calculation. You will pass away alone, unmourned, with no family to grieve your passing, and no friends to remember your better qualities. Your death will be recorded in parish registers as just another vagrant who succumbed to disease and poverty. No one will tell stories about your adventures, because the reality of those adventures contains nothing worth celebrating. No children will play games based on your exploits, because your exploits consisted mainly of terrorizing innocent people. No romantic legends will grow around your memory, because your actual life contained nothing romantic. The comparison with what your life might have been is the cruelest calculation of all. Had you remained in legitimate employment, you would likely be married with children, established in a trade, respected in your community. Your death would matter to people who loved you, and your life would have contributed something positive to the world. Instead, you chose the path that led to this charity hospital bed, this lonely death, this waste of whatever potential you once possessed. The boy who dreamed of adventure and freedom became a man who found only violence and bondage, then passed away as a beggar in a foreign land. The doctor who attends your final days is a young man fresh from Edinburgh's medical school, full of theories about tropical diseases and their treatment. He's fascinated by your case as a medical curiosity and asks numerous questions about your symptoms and their progression. You try to explain that your real disease isn't tropical fever or chronic dysentery, but the accumulated damage from choices that seemed reasonable at the time, but proved catastrophically wrong. This kind of damage can't be treated with medicine because it's fundamentally spiritual and moral rather than physical. The body can recover from most injuries if given proper care, the doctor explains earnestly. But psychological trauma and moral corruption are beyond medical treatment. They require different kinds of healing that we don't fully understand. You appreciate his honesty. Even if his diagnosis offers no comfort, the healing you need would require undoing the past, making different choices, living a different life. Since that's impossible, you're left to pass away with the consequences of decisions made by a younger, more foolish version of yourself. The charitable women who visit the hospital and provide comfort to dying patients are kind, but naive about the realities of your past. They speak of redemption and forgiveness as if all sins are equally forgivable, as if all damaged lives can be made meaningful through faith and good works. You want to believe their message, but honesty prevents such comfort. Some choices create consequences that persist beyond any possibility of redemption. Some lives become so damaged that no amount of good intention can repair them. Some stories have no happy endings because the protagonists made too many wrong choices too consistently over too long a period. The other patients in the charity ward are mostly old men who've lived full lives and are passing away peacefully surrounded by families who love them. Their deaths have dignity and meaning that yours lacks. They're completing natural life cycles rather than suffering premature termination due to self-inflicted damage. Your final conversations with Tom, who visits when his own health permits, focus on the lessons that might be learned from your experience. Both of you hope that somehow your failures might serve as warnings to others considering similar paths. Tell them it's not worth it, you whisper during one of his visits. Tell them the stories they hear are lies, that pirates die young and poor and alone. Tell them to find legitimate work, marry decent women, raise families, build something lasting instead of destroying what other people built. But you both know these warnings will likely go unheeded. Young men seeking adventure and easy wealth will continue making the same mistakes, drawn by the same romantic illusions that led you astray. The cycle will repeat itself until piracy becomes impossible rather than merely unprofitable. Your final weeks pass in a haze of fever, pain, and gradually diminishing awareness. The tropical diseases that have been slowly ending your life for years finally overwhelm your body's remaining defenses. Your mind, damaged by repeated episodes of high fever, retreats into confusion and delirium. Sometimes you think you're back aboard the Revenge, calling orders to crewmates long gone. Sometimes you're in Port Royal, spending treasure you never really owned. Sometimes you're fighting Spanish sailors who turn into Charleston dock workers who transform into hospital attendants trying to give you medicine. Tom visits when he can, but his own declining health makes the journey from the docks increasingly difficult. Mrs. Henderson, your former landlord, stops by once to collect money you still owe for rent. The charitable ladies continue their rounds, offering prayers and small comforts that you're no longer lucid enough to appreciate. The hospital chaplain, a Methodist minister named Williams, tries to prepare you for death through religious instruction and confession. But your mind is too far gone to engage seriously with theological concepts, and your past seems too distant and unreal to confess meaningfully. God's mercy is infinite, he assures you during one of your clearer moments. No sin is too great for divine forgiveness if the sinner truly repents. You want to believe him, but repentance requires a clarity of mind and strength of spirit that your damaged brain can no longer summon. The man who committed those crimes seems like a different person entirely. Someone whose motivations and decisions you can barely remember, much less feel genuine remorse for on your final conscious day. Tom brings news that completes the circle of your pirate experience. Jenkins, your old shipmate and mentor in the ways of pirate life, has been captured in Savannah and will be hanged within the week. He's the last of the Revenge's crew still alive, and his death will close the final chapter on Captain Blackwood's brief reign of terror. End of an era, Tom observes quietly. Last of the old crew gone. Last of the men who remember what it was really like. Now there's just the stories people tell, and they get more romantic every year. You try to speak, to offer some final observation about the meaning of it all. But your voice fails, and your thoughts scatter before you can organize them into words. The fever rises again, bringing delirium and confusion that will not clear before death arrives. Your last coherent thought is a simple calculation that summarizes everything you've learned. The pirate life promised freedom but delivered slavery. Promised wealth but brought poverty. Promised adventure but led to an early grave. The mathematics were always against you, but you were too young and too foolish to understand the real odds. You pass away on a Tuesday morning in March, alone except for a hospital attendant who records the time and cause of death for official records. Your body is buried in Charleston's Potter's Field, unmarked and unremembered. No one mourns your passing because no one loved you enough to grieve. Tom survives you by 6 months before succumbing to the same combination of tropical diseases and accumulated damage that ended your life. The other former pirates working Charleston's docks follow similar patterns. Early death, pauper's burial, no legacy beyond cautionary tales that no one listens to. The Revenge's crew of nearly 200 men is eventually reduced to 0 survivors. Their average life expectancy after joining the crew was 18 months. Their average total earnings from piracy were less than a legitimate sailor would make in 3 months. Their contribution to human civilization was entirely negative. Captain Blackwood's treasure remains buried on its Caribbean island, waiting for discoverers who will never come. The Spanish silver that cost so many lives to capture returns to the earth that originally yielded it, having served no purpose except to motivate violence and theft. The merchant sailors eliminated during the Revenge's raids are forgotten by history, their names unrecorded, and their families unmarked by any monument to their suffering. The passengers terrorized during pirate attacks carry psychological scars that affect their children and grandchildren. The economic damage caused by piracy slows colonial development and increases prices for essential goods. In the broader sweep of history, Caribbean piracy represents a brief aberration, a period when weak governmental control and economic opportunity created conditions that allowed organized crime to flourish temporarily. But these conditions were always temporary, and the criminals who exploited them were always doomed to elimination or marginalization. The romantic myths that grow up around piracy in later centuries ignore completely the mathematical realities that governed the actual experience. Real pirates died young, died poor, died alone, and contributed nothing positive to human progress. Their lives were cautionary tales about the costs of choosing violence and theft over legitimate labor and social cooperation. The lesson, for anyone wise enough to learn it, is simple. The statistics don't lie. 90% of pirates died within 2 years, not from sword fights or naval battles, but from disease, violence, and the grinding realities of criminal life. Your chances of surviving even one voyage were worse than Russian roulette. And now, as your consciousness fades and your breathing slows to match the ancient rhythms of rest, perhaps you can finally understand what those numbers really meant. They weren't just statistics, they were prophecies. Mathematical predictions of the fate that awaited anyone foolish enough to think they could beat odds that had never been beaten. Survive a lifestyle that destroyed almost everyone who tried it. The Caribbean waves continue their eternal rhythm, washing against shores where pirate ships once anchored. But those ships are gone now, rotted away or sunk in forgotten battles. Their crews have returned to the earth or the sea that claimed them. Only the stories remain, and even those grow more distant with each passing year. Sleep comes easily now, deeper than any sleep you've known since childhood. The pain fades, the fever breaks, and the long nightmare finally ends. You are free at last, not the freedom you sought as a young man joining a pirate crew, but the only freedom that was ever really available. Freedom from a life that was always unsustainable, always doomed, always leading to this quiet bed in a charity hospital where forgotten men come to die. The fire crackles softly in the hospital's hearth, much like the fires you once sat beside on tropical beaches, planning raids that would make you rich and famous. But those fires burned out long ago, and the men who warmed themselves beside them are gone, leaving only the gentle sound of flames consuming wood. Flames that will also die when their fuel is exhausted. Flames that remind us that nothing lasts forever, especially dreams built on violence and theft. Your breathing becomes shallower now, each breath a little weaker than the last, like waves retreating farther and farther up the beach until they no longer reach the sand. The sounds of the hospital fade, the footsteps of nurses making their rounds, the quiet conversations of other patients, the distant bells of Charleston's churches calling the faithful to evening prayer. In these final moments, if consciousness could be said to remain, there might be a kind of peace in the simple fact that the struggle is ending. No more running from the past, no more fear of discovery, no more pain from wounds that never properly healed. The mathematics of mortality have finally balanced their books, and the debt is paid in full. The young man who once stood on a Caribbean beach and dreamed of treasure and adventure is gone, replaced by this broken body in a charity bed. But perhaps in some small way, his story serves a purpose, a reminder that some prices are too high to pay, some adventures too costly to survive, some dreams too dangerous to pursue. The candle by your bedside burns lower, its flame flickering in the gentle breeze from an open window. Soon it will gutter out, leaving only darkness and silence. But in that darkness, there is no longer any fear, no more regret, no continuing punishment for choices made long ago by someone who no longer exists. The last thing you hear is the sound of rain beginning to fall on Charleston's cobblestone streets, a gentle drumming that reminds you of waves against a ship's hull, of tropical storms in distant seas, of all the water that has passed under all the bridges since you first set foot aboard a pirate vessel and changed the course of your life forever. And with that thought, as soft as the rain and as final as the tide, consciousness slips away like a ship disappearing over the horizon, carrying with it all the pain and regret and bitter knowledge of a life lived badly, but honestly regretted in its final moments.
The rain continues to fall, washing the dust from Charleston streets and filling the gutters with clean water that will flow eventually to the sea.
The fire in the hearth burns lower, casting dancing shadows on the walls that flicker and fade like memories of men long dead. And in a charity bed in a city far from where it all began, another casualty of the pirate life finds the peace that was never available during the years of running and hiding and slow decay. Tomorrow the hospital attendants will record another death, another pauper's burial, another forgotten soul who came to Charleston seeking refuge and found instead only a place to die quietly away from the scenes of his crimes. The cycle will continue as it always has. Young men drawn by stories of adventure and easy wealth, older men paying the price for believing those stories, and the sea claiming them all in the end, as it always does. But tonight, for just this moment, there is silence and stillness, and the simple grace of an ending that, while neither happy nor triumphant, is at least final. The horrible life of pirates reaches its inevitable conclusion not with sword fights or treasure maps, but with a quiet breath released into the darkness of a charity ward, where the only treasure is the absence of pain, and the only adventure is the long sleep that follows a life lived on the wrong side of the odds. The statistics, as always, prove correct. 90% don't survive. You are never going to be part of the 10% who did. The mathematics of piracy were rigged from the beginning. A game where the house always wins and the players always lose, sooner or later, one way or another. And now the game is over. The dice have stopped rolling.
And the final score is written in the parish records of Charleston,
South Carolina. Another life wasted. Another dream proven false. Another reminder that some stories don't have happy endings because they were never meant to end well. Rest now, in the silence that follows all storms. In the peace that comes only when the violence finally stops. In the understanding that arrives too late to change anything, but just in time to make sense of it all. The boring history of sleep claims another restless soul, and the world continues without pause, having learned nothing from your example that it didn't already know but had temporarily chosen to forget.